are. Welcome to this workshop of the European Blockchain Observatory and Forum on a specific topic of blockchain applications in the energy sector. My name is Ioannis Vlachos. I'm with the Energy Web Foundation and also the European Blockchain Observatory and Forum, and I will be the moderator for today's workshop. Before jumping into our interesting discussion with the number of panels that we have, let me share with you the housekeeping rules about today's workshop. It will be a workshop with a duration of approximately 3 hours. To answer any questions that you may have, please use the Q&A section of Zoom only. You can either ask a question with your name or anonymously if you prefer. If you wish to contribute or leave a remark, please do so in the chat section of Zoom. And during the presentations or while the panel is discussing, you can write up your questions in the Q&A section. Most relevant questions will be selected by the organizers to be directed to the panelists for an answer. Just to mention that this workshop will be recorded. Only what is said and presented on the screen by panelists and the moderators will be recorded, so your questions will not appear in the recording. Finally, the recorded version will be uploaded on the EU Blockchain Observatory and Forum media channels a few days after the event. So thank you, everyone. Let me ask my co-moderator, Tonya, to verify if we have Lucas Repa on. Hi, Lucas. Nice to see you again.
Good morning.
Good morning. So let me introduce to you Lucas Repa, Senior Policy Officer from DG Connect, the European Commission. And we will have Lucas to give the welcome note and the opening speech for his workshop. So thank you, Lucas, for joining. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me, and good morning, everybody, on behalf of the European Commission. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you for the Observatory for organizing this workshop. In these turbulent times not only in the east of Europe, but also turbulent times for the blockchain and crypto assets industry, I think it is of particular importance to remind ourselves that blockchain is more than only a technology to support crypto assets. It is a transversal technology that can support a multitude of applications, not least applications that support sustainability. And that's why we find it so important to have the European Observatory for blockchain dive into the topic of blockchain in the energy sector. This is a topic that has been at the forefront of discussion since 2014-15, with the first potential use cases emerging for peer-to-peer trading of energy, and the more lately use cases, as we will hear today, in the area of using blockchain for authenticating and proving the origin of renewable energy and the state of electricity. And that is very, very exciting for us. And we are working here closely with our colleagues from DG Energy on exploring the potential of blockchain for sustainability. So I would just like to thank the European Observatory for putting together this exciting workshop, finding such interesting speakers, doing the groundwork of researching this thoroughly. And I would like to wish everybody present here today a good discussion, a fruitful discussion, and hopefully new findings that will bring blockchain in the energy sector to the next level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luca. And let me express on behalf of the European Blockchain Observatory and Forum, our thank you for your support, the DG Connect support towards the realization not only of this workshop and the thematic report on the blockchain and energy sector, but also throughout these years of collaboration. So thank you again. And let's, without losing any time, let's dig a little bit deeper on the topic of today's workshop. So let me again share my screen and share with you a presentation about the recently published report by the Blockchain Observatory and Forum on the topic of applications of blockchain technology in the energy sector. So what we're going to do in the next, let's say, 7 to 10 minutes is walk you through the structure of the report, and also conclude with some of the most important, let's say, policy recommendations towards the European Commission. So, as we mentioned, the Blockchain Observatory and Forum published 2 or 3 weeks ago this specific report that focuses upon applications of blockchain technology and DLT in general in the energy sector. So to come to this report and to draft the contents of it, we consulted and we worked together with a large number of TSOs and DSOs, industry experts, also from the academia and research institutes. But at the same time, we also spoke and interviewed a number of C-level executives from big corporations, TSOs and DSOs across Europe. We also had the support of our panel of experts of the European Blockchain and Forum. And using the input from these, let's say, individual groups of people, we consolidated the findings inside the report that we are going to briefly present to you in the next minutes. And so the first chapter, the first section of this thematic report focused upon the standardization activities of blockchain in the energy sector specifically. So what we present here is an overview of the standardization activities and groups at the crossroads of energy and blockchain. And specifically, we have been in contact with both IEEE from the United States as well with Senelec from EU to discuss and present their views on standardization of specifically blockchain and the energy sector. On the second chapter of the report, we take a deep dive into specific use cases of blockchain technology for the energy sector. And more specifically, we examine 3 main categories of use cases that we think have a lot of attention right now in the market. And these 3 use cases: flexibility services, energy attribute certificates trading, and identities for energy assets. So under this topic of flexibility services, we explore applications of blockchain technology, especially for providing flexibility services to transmission distribution system operators across Europe. And these applications not only allow medium or large scale assets, but also small scale BERs to participate in wholesale ancillary services and or balancing markets. The second group of use cases focuses upon the trading of the so-called energy attribute certificates in Europe. These are commonly known as guarantees of origin for parts of the world like North America or Asia, let's say, mentioned as IREX or REX, renewable energy certificates. And the goal is how you use blockchain applications for corporate renewable energy procurement, certifying 100% renewable powered electric vehicle charging, low carbon fuel sourcing, and similar use cases. And the last, but I think one of the most important applications of blockchain technologies focuses on how you assign identities to energy assets in order for these assets to participate in a trusted and verifiable way in energy markets. So we explore the concept of DIDs, decentralized identifiers, verifiable credentials, self-sovereign digital identities, to allow, as we mentioned, assets to be uniquely identified and also help and support their participation across different energy markets. In the third section of the report, with the collaboration of the Bridge Initiative of the European Commission, we conducted a very thorough review, and from our, let's say, knowledge is the first and only systematic review of the status of R&D innovation in Europe when it comes to R&D activities and funding, mainly under the Horizon 2020 and the Horizon Europe framework programs, especially on projects that consolidate in a way blockchain technologies and the energy sector. In the fourth chapter of the report, we present very specific case studies. So we reach out to reputable companies from the blockchain energy sector and ask them to present the most, let's say, notable flagship use cases and projects that have been developed over the past years. So we have 24/7 corporate power purchase agreement in the Netherlands by FlexiDAO, presentation of the project Edge in Australia on energy demand and generation exchange by EnergyWeb. We have a presentation on the BMIL, the Blockchain Machine Identity Ledger, a project sponsored by the German Energy Association, DINA. Also, BMW Group shared their views and experience on working on a blockchain-based payment and validity check system for EV services in the electric mobility space. Also, Power Ledger from Australia, let's say, shared their views on a peer-to-peer energy exchange project. And last but not least, we have the concept of Energy Web Zero, an initiative that was started and then spin out of Energy Web on building a global renewables hub. The fifth chapter of the report gathers insights from the industry. So we interviewed, let's say, executives from the big players of the energy markets in the energy sector in Europe that have also a huge impact on blockchain space. So we have interviewed people from ENGIE, Elia Group, Stedin, Volkswagen, and EnergyWeb, and we are also super excited to have them today with us for our workshop. And to conclude with a set of policy recommendations, we have gathered and grouped these recommendations in three distinct groups, starting with EU level recommendations. What was the main outcome of this report is like standardization should be promoted at a European level, especially on the topic of digital and sovereign identities. We have seen traction on this topic, of course, under the EBSI infrastructure and initiative, but we need to have, let's say, a more solid policy framework, especially for the application of these identities, also not only to individual persons, but also to assets, and help them participate in markets. Also, as we mentioned, we would propose to the European Commission to include energy-related use cases for the evaluation in the context of the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure, the EBSI, and is also highly recommended that a systematic exploitation of the results of the various research and innovation projects under the Horizon 2020 and the new Horizon Europe framework should be promoted. So similar to Bridge initiative, we should also focus explicitly on the sub group of projects tackling the blockchain aspects on the energy sector. On the member state level now, it is also recommended that the national regulatory authorities should start thinking of allowing small-scale DERs, less than 1 megawatt, to participate directly or indirectly in energy markets. We have seen this need growing its attention over the past years. We have seen, let's say, last year, a pioneering report by NSOE and the Association of Distribution System Operators mentioning for the first time in a roadmap and a policy and recommendation joint paper the word of direct participation of assets in markets. So the regulatory framework should also be adapted to allow the visibility of energy assets connected to the distribution grid to the TSOs as well. And this can be facilitated by using digital and self-sovereign identities. Also, NRAs, national regulatory authorities, should provide regulatory sandboxes so that larger scale projects that are moving out of the POC stage and moving into, let's say, an MVP to be easily deployed and tested in a real world environment. This is expected, of course, to radically accelerate the adoption of new technologies by both TSOs and DSOs across Europe. Also, e-mobility and the increased rate of penetration of electric vehicles should be taken into account, and therefore policies should consider the way that regulated entities like TSOs and DSOs or car manufacturers and charging point operators to leverage the benefit of the EV's flexibilities and let's say use this available flexibility of the cars, of the EV's batteries in different and innovative market designs. And last but not least, a set of more generic policy recommendations focusing again upon the concept of digital identities should be also promoted and by the European Commission to support the secure and trusted data exchange between different market participants. We know that it's a big discussion between the NRAs, TSOs and DSOs on the topic of the TSO-DSO cooperation and coordination. So we do believe that by using DIDs, verifiable credentials based on blockchain technologies is indeed the way forward. And also, we believe that public blockchain should be used in order to promote collaboration between the various energy market participants and actors and limit any chance of creating any sort of vendor lock-in. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I will stop sharing right now and move forward to, let's say, our keynote speech for today by Elena Boskov-Kovac, who is the chairwoman of a TIP-S-Net Working Group 4. Elena is also a managing director and managing partner of Blueprint Energy Solutions, a consultancy firm out of Vienna, Austria. And Elena will walk us through the work that the TIP-S-Net Working Group 4 has been done on the concept of energy digitalization and customer engagement. So, Elena, the floor is yours. I don't know if Elena has joined or not. Let me just ping her. Okay. Just a second. Yeah, she's trying to join. Yeah, she will be here in a second. Tonya, can you please forward to Elena the Zoom link? We had some issues connecting. Okay, thank you. In the meantime, maybe also, Tonya, can you share Elena's presentation to have it on screen? Yeah, she's joining now. Hi, Elena.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So the floor is yours. Do you want us to share the presentation?
Yes, if possible.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. I'm very happy to join you today with a brief representation from the ETIPS-Net community perspectives on this very important topic to be discussed. So for those of you who don't know me, and I will try to keep strictly on schedule, my name is Elena Boskov-Kovac, and I am a chair of the Working Group 4 of ETIPS-Net, European Technology Innovation Platform for Smart Networks for Energy Transition, a body set up by the Commission to drive the topics related to innovation in energy transition. And these are in a nutshell, the goals and mission of the ETIPSnet, which published a vision for European, very different, very competitive, decarbonized, decentralized, zero neutral energy sector, which is, I would say, looking very different in the horizon, and the innovation that is being foreseen by the ETIPSnet is included in the design of roadmaps every 10 years and the implementation plan. As such, and you can go to the next slide, essentially, ETIPSnet sees the system flexibility, energy efficiency, and many different aspects being part of the change and shifts in the future energy landscape. And I'm sure that all of us cannot talk about it without talking about digitalization of the energy sector. For this reason, and you can go to the next slide, digitalization is seen as one of the key enablers for the energy transition in Europe. And in addition to this, I would say the key into how to achieve this lies not in the first parts of the name of our working group, which is digitalization of energy, but also in the customer engagement part. Because one of the, let's say, highlights that we try to position always and propose is that we need essentially smart sector integration into a system of systems, into a one-stop shop for all of the participants, both old and new, in the energy transition story that constitute building blocks and that try to, let's say, design the sector integration the way it would be in the future. We have on this topic, amongst others, published a very interesting paper last year in terms of, I would say, most innovative solutions that are out there. On the left side, as a brief overview, you can see that we have other topics, other user groups that are discussing innovation and I would say publishing interesting pilots, interesting design of sandboxes, regulatory sandboxes, which I believe is again a very important prerequisite for driving innovation, especially when it comes to very controversial technologies, but also very innovative technologies such as blockchain. Let's go to the next slide. So as such, ICT presents a backbone for the European Union strategy for energy system integration and innovation as such. Digitalization is absolutely necessary. We are facing both digitalization of data and assets in the system that previously have not been considered. As such, we are facing increased electrification of the system, and in order to accelerate the pace of change, we need a shift of paradigm. We need to rethink things, and we need to take away, I would say, complexity, looking at how the system has been designed, the security of the system and the electricity supply, which was run by large national system operators and operated top-down, now is being increasingly decentralized and depends on engagement of aggregators, virtual power plant operators, and all flexibility asset owners in the system, including the end customers. So therefore, what we see now is that the backbone to implement such change is in the ICT technologies, in innovative technologies. And the upcoming new interfaces within sectors are enabled by many new digital solutions. And for this reason, we see the development and use of new platforms through enhanced connectivity of assets in the system and within the context of evolving markets. And I would add to this that what we see is that newly introduced platforms constitute the necessary link between existing ancillary services markets and aggregators of distributed flexibility. What we see, for example, now very important is the aspect of new technologies such as blockchain technologies, distributed ledger technologies, at the level of, I would say, electricity markets first, in the form of, for example, crowd balancing platforms as the tool to standardize processes and protocols to enable distributed flexibility resources. And they also promote pan-European collaboration. Many of the examples that we see come from different sectors, from financial sectors, for example, from telecom, and they essentially really spur the implementation of new, innovative, and decentralized approach to peer-to-peer trading, for example, between stakeholders in the energy value chain. But I would also add to it that the future and the potential of innovative technologies such as blockchain does not lie only in facilitating decentralized peer-to-peer trading. It doesn't stop there, because when we address the topic of digitalization for smart sector integration, we have to acknowledge that the role of data governance, availability, and the related enabling infrastructures cannot be underestimated. And therefore, I think it is important to talk about data privacy, data governance, and potential role of this technology in protecting the end customer and also in the cybersecurity. So I would say that we expect to see more development in this aspect as well. In addition to that, definitely, let's say the innovation in the energy sector, leveraging such technologies goes hand in hand with design of new architectures, I would say new concepts, and requires strong reliance on local regulatory frameworks. So this is it for my part. This is, I would say, a very brief introduction of how we see the smart sector integration and digitalization as the key enabler here for the energy transition. And I would say that we certainly hope and see that the demos, pilots, and all of these sandboxes, and even pilots with energy communities, they show that we can expect real life application and that they are currently being facilitated. We hope to see higher rollout.
Thank you, Elena, for your participation and for sharing the views of the ETIPS networking group. So anyone that is interested in learning more, you can visit the ETIPS.net website and go through the various working groups and get their insights. I think ETIPS.net has also published recently their roadmap for innovation for the next year. So this is also a key document that everyone should have a look at, because most of the insights of the different working groups are included there. So again, Elena, thanks a lot for your participation today.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and good luck today.
Thank you. So let's start then with the first panel session of the day that will focus upon applications of blockchain technology in the energy sector. So without further ado, let me introduce to you my co-panelists for today. So we have some great speakers with no particular order. Let me start with Etienne Gehen from ENGIE. Etienne is the Digital Innovation Officer. We also have together with us Paul Bradley, Director of Strategy and Innovation at Keegan, leaders of the iSIM product. We also have Kai Schmidt, together with us, innovation project manager at Elia Group, also one of the co-founders of the NRverse startup company focusing on decarbonizing the metaverse. And last but not least, we have Rafael San Juan Moya, member of innovation and digital platforms and Iberdrola. So welcome everyone, and thanks for making and taking the time to joining today's session. So my first question goes to Etienne. So Etienne, we know that ENGIE is a multinational company with a global footprint, right? So from your position, your key position as a digital innovation officer within ENGIE, could you please share your views on the way ENGIE has been using and plans to utilize blockchain technology in the future? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ioannis. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very glad to share our use cases. We have been using blockchain technologies now for maybe 4 years, 5 years. Industrially, we have a couple of use cases, and the first that we implemented is the most obvious is the certificates of renewable energy production that we provide to our customers that buy our green energy. Not so much so that they can resell those certificates. Those are not at the IREC standard. They cannot be traded. They are used as a marketing instrument for the clients of our clients, in fact. And so they can prove that what they sell to their own clients has been manufactured with green energy. And of course, we use blockchain to allow those clients to audit the certificates to see them whenever they want. And so that was the first application. We continued now more towards the use of distributed identifiers and validation of credentials. So we created in France, for instance, a small startup with our competitors, EDF, to certify our invoices, which are really often used in France and maybe elsewhere is the same as a proof of a postal address. And so we certify to whoever makes a KYC using those invoices that if they receive an invoice, they can check that they are genuine simply by comparing signatures of those invoices. If they find it in the blockchain that we run in France, that means that we put it there. And means that it is genuine. So this is leading towards more general application of DIDs that we want to apply to our assets and simplify a lot of processes. There's another running project that we will discuss later in the panel, so I won't access it, but it is DeFi. So there's many things. And essentially, we now consider blockchain as a specific way of storing information, of course, with the trust attribute, and that opens a lot of possibility, but nothing more special. It's just another way to store in the cloud with a special type of attribute, and that makes them interesting, of course.
Thank you, Etienne, for sharing your views. And my second question is for Paul from Keegan. So Paul, Keegan is a leading company in the telecommunications sector by integrating trust and security through SIM, eSIM, and iSIM technologies. So in your view, in which ways a telecom company can benefit from blockchain technology, especially when it comes to the energy sector that heavily relies in telecommunication networks?
Yeah, thanks, Yannis. That's a fantastic question, and again, thank you also for the invitation to come and share some insights here. Well, since the dawn of 5G and even before, the mobile telecommunications operators really dreamt of expanding from consumer services into new industrial verticals, and that's a promise which until now has unfortunately largely disappointed. Maybe with the exception of the automotive market, where regulation has imposed a lot of use of cellular technologies. So But given the distributed nature of energy networks, they really heavily rely on mobile and cellular technology for connecting devices on the most part. So mobile connectivity providers are already somehow serving the energy market in some ways. And if you guess what, every mobile device on the planet has one often overlooked asset to authenticate to the cellular network, which is the SIM or the eSIM, which is in itself a tiny security platform that can be used for countless services beyond cellular network authentication. And so Etienne just mentioned the protection of identities and the importance of identities. And the very nature of the SIM is to store credentials securely to allow devices to authenticate to the mobile network, but also that very same SIM can be used to both generate and protect credentials to transact on blockchain networks. So eSIMs today by default support all of the necessary crypto algorithms used by the most popular blockchains. So at Keegan, we've championed an open usage model of a GSMA standard known as IoT Safe, which enables mobile network operators to protect and allow the usage of credentials by third parties wishing to use the SIM as a root of trust. That root of trust can then be used both to ensure transport layer security, for example, for a device to communicate with a public cloud like AWS or Azure, or indeed to sign any transaction to prove its authenticity. So SIMs in themselves have tamper-resistant properties, so the data cannot be extracted from them, and they're a vault like with many different safety deposit boxes inside. Multiple parties can each store their own sets of credentials securely, be it a network operator's connectivity profile for the network authentication, or credentials that can be used by different providers to authenticate transactions on the grid. And so once those transactions are signed with a private key, which is the basis of all crypto that we're speaking about, the integrity of the data and the provenance of the data is somehow guaranteed. So credentials used to transact on energy networks need to be securely provisioned into the SIMs at edge devices. And telecommunication companies have a massive role to play there. The initial credentials in order to open the secure channel back to the validation nodes can either be injected into the SIM at the time of manufacturing or through an eSIM profile download. And then new operational credentials can securely be generated inside the SIM directly when it's in the field using a technology known as onboard key generation. So Keegan, having been founded by ARM, we've also championed another important technology which will ease the deployment of this omnipresent cellular connectivity on energy grids, which is the integrated SIM that you just mentioned, Yanis, or iSIM. So iSIM technology involves taking the hardware of the SIM and integrating it into the system on chip design inside the chipsets used in popular cellular modules which are deployed today. So Keegan's iSIM technology is already available in many different modules used in the LP WAN space, which are often used on grids based upon Sony semiconductor chipsets from Murata. So and the modules are from Murata, Quectel, Sercom, Telit, and WNC. And also we have Sequence that are using the Keegan iSIM, and they've enabled modules with the Keegan iSIM. So when you combine the accessibility to connectivity with the low power, low footprint of iSIM and open IoT safe technology, we believe that it's really a winning combination for telecommunications providers to provide access to secure, enhanced transport layer security and blockchain-based security features on top of like this proven, robust, and reliable cellular network security.
Thanks, Paul. And yeah, moving from one pioneer to the other. So my next question goes to Kai Schmidt from Elia Group. So Kai, I think Elia Group and 50 Hertz is one of the pioneering TSOs, right? I would say globally in applying blockchain technologies for solving actual problems in the energy sector. So could you please share your experience from the journey so far? Thank you.
Well, we are at least working on it. Not saying that we're applying it in practice, unfortunately, but we are definitely working on it. Yeah, maybe to give a bit of a to tell the story. So we, as a TSO, we have quite an important role in the energy system, and what we see is currently a paradigm shift that everyone is well aware of. So we have a system in the past where production was following demand, and now we move into a system that is full of renewables, where demand has to follow the production. So we move into a more decarbonized system with a lot of renewables. that is also more decentralized. So we have smaller devices, we have that are part of the energy system, so electric vehicles, batteries, heat pumps, and they can also help and contribute to do their job in the grid, so to stabilize it, or to provide user benefits by saving the electricity bill. And then also with the trend of digitization, and also what Paul just presented basically, is we have IoT devices that can connect to the internet, that can send data, that can receive data. And we see a lot of new players that want to leverage on this and build new services. So OEMs that have smart home solutions and energy solutions that basically play exactly in this field. And yeah, what our role is as a TSO is to work on a system that is more flexible, that we can also reduce copper, so or steel, so to build less lines in order to build the system more efficiently. We also want to put the consumer in the center, because that is the most important thing at the end, since we are serving also consumer needs. But that requires a lot of coordination effort. So between different parties, TSOs, DSOs, everyone that is in the energy sector, but also that is now outside of the energy sector, such as e-mobility, for example, because that is the fastest growing source of decentralized flexibilities. And we have to get out of our own ecosystem and yeah, understand how other ecosystems work and then exchange data to it. And this is, I think, where blockchain comes into place and where we started also in having a higher interest in it. Since we have a distributed ledger where we can trust the data, we move to a Web3 world where we have digital identities, where we are not anonymous anymore. So we can build basically ways, or that is actually what we hope, to exchange data in a trusted way. Also what Paul basically just presented is one really important part of it. So we started 5 years ago with a proof of concept for energy trading microtransactions to understand how smart contract works and to really understand the technology. Then we built the DLT lab together with Energy Web Foundation, where we investigated different challenges that we have in the company. And what we did is we started setting up a decentralized platform for the integration of electric vehicles. So our proof of concept and the idea was we build a platform where everyone has a digital identity, TSO, DSOs, e-mobility service providers, OEMs, they can log in and they can access information about a vehicle, because that would be our first use case in order to demonstrate this new way of interoperability. And I think we also did a proof of concept on granular certificates of origin, so the use case that Etienne just presented. And I think what we can take out of it is, as soon as we have use cases, it's at least my point of view, where we have to write a lot of information on chain, it very quickly becomes very difficult and not really applicable. So with granular certificates of origin, for example, you have production and consumption time series on a public ledger, which is quite critical from our point of view. So these are the learnings that we took out of this journey. And I think where we are really focusing on is self-sovereign identities, asset verification, defining ownership of assets, defining different asset specifications, and to help using the technologies to verify the information and spread and make the information accessible to other parties within the sector, but also outside of the sectors. Yeah, and I think that's also where we focus on right now. I can also present another use case. I will do that as well later. But I think that's kind of the journey that we took. So a lot of high expectations. What we also saw, maybe one last point, is that, for example, for flexibility management of electric vehicles, we had the ambition at the beginning. Yeah, we use blockchain and we start operating flexibility on electric mobility side, and we saw that we had a technology, but the processes were actually not there yet. So there's also kind of a very fast evolving blockchain world, and then the reality is sometimes not there yet. So
thanks, Kai, for sharing your insights on the topic. Last but not least, Rafael from Iberdrola. So Iberdrola is huge, right? Multinational company. So same question to you as well. Could you please share the way that, let's say, utilities see up the application of blockchain technology, and for Iberdrola specifically, which are the most important use cases that can be commercially deployed without the need of, let's say, waiting for a radical change in the current regulatory framework?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you for having me here. Yeah, so I think our journey has been similar to our co-panelists. I think in terms of the areas of use cases, we've been focusing a lot more on sovereign identity than the smart contract side of things. So we did start 2019 with guarantees of origin use cases. We had a hydroelectric power plant and 2 different wind farms, and we were providing electricity to a local bank and a local telecommunications company through smart contracts. Although in terms of scalability, well, obviously we need to be very conscious of the amount of generation that can be provided in terms of the amount of consumption to guarantee 100% of renewable energy being provided. So we did dabble in that. We have done proofs of concept in terms of smart contracts and guarantees of origin. However, there have been more use cases in terms of sovereign identity of many different aspects of the value chain in the electricity industry. So we can start with a project we've done in the UK with Scottish Power Networks and National Grid, whereby we got together different DSOs and the TSO to essentially create a common register of assets, distributed assets for generation and storage, in order to make it very easy for third parties to introduce new assets to the network, and for the network or the grid to be able to have the flexibility, knowing where all the assets are, what they're currently generating, and where they are physically. Moving on from that, we have also implemented self-sovereign identity in compliance. This is a very big use case for us, whereby we've created a blockchain-based platform where we have different partners. Ones will be the auditors or certifying companies, such as INOR, which is the Spanish ISO, or Deloitte, or different legal companies. And then we have things like manufacturers or installers, smart meter installers, or fieldwork workforce provision companies that are interested in uploading all of their certifications for, say, different staff capabilities, such as work at heights, or work in offshore platforms, work in explosive environments, work in obviously high voltage situations. And this speeds up the compliance process for us massively, because we have hundreds of companies that essentially prove themselves with the people who emit the certificates that they provide, that those certificates are valid. So that whenever they've done work with one of our competitors, for example, that is already embedded into our platform. That helps massively in terms of speed when we want to tackle one of these jobs. And that's very, very important in situations where we have, for example, storms or outages, and you need to react very quickly. This compliance platform has helped us make decisions much faster using blockchain.
Thank you.
Okay.
And yeah, please go on. Yeah, Rafael.
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention another one that's very recent that we've implemented was our shareholders meeting. So Iberdrola has over 600,000 different shareholders. So that's over 500,000 people with shares, and a lot of them are not eager to vote on these shareholders meetings, but they proxy or they delegate the votes. So what we've done is created an underlying blockchain platform so that anyone who delegates the vote or has a proxy agent or a holding, something like that, can review that whatever they ordered to vote was actually voted. It's less close to the actual, energy and utilities sector, but it's something we've implemented and with much success. And there's other things, but I think we'll have time to probably discuss in the coming questions.
That's actually a real world problem, right? Managing 500,000 shareholders, that's a problem.
I would say that's a very first large scale, outside of proof of concept, kind of real world application, much like Etienne's invoicing project. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Rafael. Thank you. So let's move back to Paul now from Keegan. Yeah, it's widely accepted that cybersecurity, especially when we are dealing with critical infrastructure, operational technology, assets, and so on, is of, let's say, high importance for the energy sector. So what is your experience from the role of blockchain technology in the cybersecurity space as a telecom company?
Yeah, so thanks, Giannis. So firstly, I think that the challenge that blockchain technology often faces is that it's a misunderstood buzzword, which is sometimes used also out of context. So from the usage of blockchain in the energy sector, I think we need to be very explicit in communicating the context, and the context, as any other, is to make sure that the integrity of the data is super solid and irrefutable. So if I, as a node, sign a transaction with another node using credentials which are securely stored in the tamper-resistant element that I advocated earlier on, then I'm proving that the transaction has happened between the two nodes. The two nodes that it's claiming to be between, and also the data within the transaction and the identities, thanks to the verifiability of the transaction and the public key infrastructure being used, is untampered and authentic. So I'm basically making sure that a transaction is indeed verifiable and that it's happened in an authentic way. So before kind of listing the benefits of the blockchain itself, like the first thing I would just like to point out is that connectivity itself ultimately does increase the attack surface, because we're opening another means into the device for someone to carry out any malicious attacks. So we need to protect the access to that channel by all of the means necessary that are at our disposition. And then, okay, of course, by leveraging blockchain, the first and most obvious, I think, benefit, at least for the energy sector, is to prevent against fraud. So this prevents, obviously, against manipulating data to falsify contribution of energy to the grid, or manipulating the consumption data. And by using blockchain technology, the data becomes verifiable and its source is proven. So secondly, of course, between implicit cellular network mechanisms and the new 5G mechanism to secure the exchange of subscriber identities with the network, as well as blockchain technology, we can obviously protect against privacy breaches through strong identity protection. Because what if a thief could detect if somebody was at home, or if they could then use that information to find out the ideal time to break in based upon consumption or whatever else, and then to try to determine a pattern. So we need to be very, very sure that, if we have nodes that are somewhere distributed in remote areas where you could start to figure out when transactions are happening or when things are taking place, you might be able to figure out a pattern. And of course, identity protection is extremely important there. The third thing, of course, that the blockchain will offer is prevention against demand manipulation. So that could lead to overproduction, or indeed a massive denial of service attack causing blackouts, because the distributed nature of the network prevents this single point of failure, which we saw with DNS server attacks and other different attacks that happened in the IoT space. Then the insights that are driven from the data leads to the fourth benefit, which is the security of the energy supply, as well as the management of it. Data is often claimed to be the new oil. However, I always believe that that the raw data itself is fairly useless unless the insights that are derived from it lead to the predictability of supply. And that's kind of one of the benefits, I think, that we can really drive from the use of blockchain. But then, like I mentioned earlier, so blockchain is only as good as the weakest link in the chain. And so if you're storing private keys used to sign in and sign transactions in a distributed, hard to reach device, which is going to be in the field for up to 20 years, and if you must protect the keys properly in this tamper-resistant hardware and take a security by design approach. If some of you remember the beginning of Android device rooting and iPhone jailbreaking and all these kind of things, it develops into a game of cat and mouse between the device OEMs who are trying to patch devices and those who are trying to kind of install non-authorized software, etc. And so whatever security features aren't baked in at the point of manufacture can't be secured later. And then, of course, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the use of onboard key generation for sure is the best practice. So the credentials and the certificates used to transact are generated within the tamper-resistant hardware and never disclosed outside of it. So that you never want your private key in a notepad document or wherever the hell people keep their private keys for their crypto wallets today. It's definitely recommended that any credentials that are preloaded as well into devices are done so in a secure facility that's audited and certified by a competent body, such as, for example, in the telecoms environment, we have the GSMA security accreditation scheme, because, you know, obviously everything depends on getting the identities into the devices in the most secure way, and then once you've seeded the initial identities, being able to generate them such that nobody will ever know what identities are in there. They weren't even injected from outside. They were literally generated on board. We get the certificate signed and we return it to the device so that the public key certificate part of the identity is secure. Then, of course, beyond blockchain, using a secure connection based upon things like TLS or DTLS at all times when communicating is extremely important.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for walking us through this exciting journey of security, cybersecurity, and telecom. So back to you, Kai, now. I think DSOs, everyone knows that DSOs and TSOs are highly regulated entities. And nowadays, regulation seems to be one of the hurdles for the wider adoption of blockchain technologies in the energy sector. So how a TSO sees the current regulatory framework, and what, according to your views, are the steps needed to be taken, and in which direction to promote and foster the use of decentralized technologies?
Yeah, thanks for regulatory question. It's always very much appreciated. So I think that we have to be careful to blame regulatory frameworks for the adoption of blockchain. I was the last days at the European Blockchain Convention in Barcelona, and there was a lot on DeFi and a lot of discussions on legal and regulatory constraints with regards to cryptocurrencies, with regards to the tokenization of everything. So there are new rules embedded, for example, the crypto travel rule, where you can have to know the sender and the recipient of crypto transactions if they exceed a certain amount. When we talk about tokenization of assets, it's quite important if we talk about security tokens, if we talk about monetary goods, because they fall under the banking regulation or not. So there's a lot of discussion, and there's also a lot of need for quick answers from the regulatory. And why do I explain this? It's because we have kind of a different situation in the energy sector. That's at least what I learned in the past years. So when Bitcoin started, a lot of new ideas, NFTs, cryptocurrencies, they popped up, and they could start from a green field. So it went crazy, and we see huge amounts of money that is now transferred with cryptocurrency. So there's a high need for a regulatory framework. If we compare it to the energy sector, we have an established system that is one of the most crucial and most important infrastructures we have in the world. And it's also a very settled system, but with distinct players that have their distinct rules. It functions very well, I would say. So even if it's not the most digitized sector, it works, and the sector in general is very careful to put in new technologies. But there is a need for, of course, to improve the system, as I explained also at the beginning, since we have this new trend, or we have to react. And there's also guidelines or regulations that lead the way. So European Green Deal, for example, the Clean Energy Package, and different electricity market directives that say we have to improve the performance of our system. We have to integrate all flexibility resources that we have, so also decentralized assets. We have to work towards interconnectivity and interoperability. So that is identification of entities, of devices, of humans. We have to go towards a real-time system. We have to integrate different sectors, and so on. So there's a whole package of things that needs to be done, and this keeps the electricity and the energy sector very, very busy right now. And then there comes blockchain, which is a new technology that is very promising. kind of the new kid in the block that no one really knows. Okay, what is it able to do? Can it really solve all the questions that we have? And I think this is our role to still provide this proof that that we can use the technology, because there are a lot of questions that are still open. So starting with the most common one is throughput and latency. I think for granular certificates of origin, for example, yes, we see that new blockchains might be able to cover these number of transactions, but there's still a question mark. It's fast evolving, but it's still not yet solved from my point of view. Then there's legal uncertainty, liability questions in a decentralized network. So what happens if smart contract is not working properly, or it was not coded properly? What is if a node validation of a certain company is failing? We have GDPR questions with regards to what should we actually store on a blockchain, because it's there for good. It's also a question, what kind of blockchain do we use? Do we use a permissioned and open blockchain, and so on? There is a cybersecurity issue that is there, and I think, Paul, you mentioned it. Yes, blockchain is secure, but if we set up a system where we have potential, where we provide a portal to attack millions of devices, we still don't know if blockchain is then the solution, or in which way we should use it at the end. So what I think needs to happen on the regulatory side is that we have to have a lot of education, and we have to do a lot of large-scale projects, because I think the worst thing that can happen is that a regulatory framework is set up that is done with a lack of understanding of the technology, because then we really can prevent new innovation. So that has to go hand in hand. But then we need large-scale demonstrators, such as GaiaX, such as OmegaX, crowd balancing platforms, where we really can test the technology. And that leads then also to a more innovative regulatory framework from my point of view. But yeah, I think there's also a lot that has to be done on the digitization and the digital infrastructure, because we don't even have smart meters right now in Germany to get information in a verifiable way. So we can say, okay, we use blockchain to certify readings, but we don't get readings in a signed way, but we have to trust the intermediary to say that this reading is this value. So we can write it on a blockchain, that's nice, but we have to still trust the intermediary. So as soon as we don't have an IT infrastructure where information can be signed on a device level and we can trust it, we also cannot do a lot of use cases that we would like to do. So this is kind of a chicken and egg problem, but I think education and large scale demonstrators are the way to go.
Thanks, Kai, for your viewpoint of the aspect of regulation and the ways to move forward into, let's say, a wider adoption of blockchain technology for the energy sector. Rafael, what are the challenges inside big companies? Okay, Kai spoke about education, training, change skills, and so on. What are the challenges that big companies face towards adopting blockchain technology as one of the many possible, let's say, tools for creating new business and revenue models, or even update their own business processes?
Yeah, so I think I would agree with Kai. I think one of the main challenges is understanding of the potential and the capabilities of blockchain when we enter a potential use case. But I would say there's another couple of things that complicate matters. When we're doing these initial pilots on blockchain, it's usually quite small scale, and usually blockchain has huge potential in large scale automations and cutting out middlemen in very large processes and things like that. So proving worth in smaller projects has been challenging, because at the end of the project you sort of evaluate and it seems like maybe the gains aren't what you expected, simply because you've not done it on a large enough scale. So that's why I was mentioning earlier, first large scale project, it's as complicated to have one vote, go into the blockchain than to have every single vote on a shareholders meeting. So for me, I would say scale of the attempt has been, relatively small and not easy to envision, what the large scale implications of it are, or the benefits. And the other one I would have to say is to do with the operational side of businesses and the IT side of business. And how it's very complex to have a person or a team that can fully understand, the security implications of an OT networks, and say, for example, IoT on substations. It's people who might understand, what those assets are, what they're doing, but maybe they're lacking on the whole IT side of infrastructure and programming, the smart contracts and things like that. So getting together a team that consistently is very, very knowledgeable on both fronts, I think is also a challenge in corporations like ours, at least what we've been finding so far. Eventually, you do find through different workshops with the tech companies to understand, the business side of the problem, and you eventually get there. But it's not as easy as, for example, implementing a machine learning model for forecasting, number of calls to a call center or demand or generation. Is usually a bit more convoluted in terms of the skill sets required from both sides, the business and the IT side. But I think those are two very big challenges. But as Kai was saying, I think both of those potentially with large scale, test projects, and with education, I think, as the time comes, these things will be more standardized and easy to understand, so that people in the business are aware of the capabilities of blockchain implementations, rather than having people from IT or tech companies come in and say, you could do this and that. So I think one of our challenges is to make sure the innovation comes from inside, from people who understand the business, which at the moment is kind of being a drag rather than a pull sort of mechanism.
Thanks, Rafael. I fully agree with what you said about bringing innovation and business on the same driver's seat, and let's say work their way forward towards adaptation inside the corporate environment. Back to you, Etienne. So you have recently launched together with EnergyWeb the Crown for Solar platform to harness the potential of DeFi. So I think it's the first DeFi project in the energy sector that helps, let's say, solar installations to energy deficient communities in Africa, for example. Could you please explain to us what is this initiative all about? Thank you.
Yes. Yes, I just first need to set the scene a little bit. We have indeed a subsidiary called NG Energy Access that provides small PV plus battery equipment to rural clients in sub-Saharan Africa. We serve about 6 million people there in 9 countries. It's Rwanda, Zambia, Uganda, those countries, and they provide equipment that are repaid over a period of 2 or 3 years by micropayment made possibly every day with their mobile phone. Right, so they pay, for instance, 20 cents, 50 cents, and as long as they pay or they are willing to pay, the equipment works. If they don't want to pay anymore, it doesn't work anymore. This is just to say that this activity requires quite a lot of investment means, because essentially we need to purchase the equipment, install it, and then get repaid over 2 or 3 years later. And we thought that there was a vast untapped amount of financing available in the crypto ecosystems right now. Even as of today, after some difficult weeks recently, there are still about $1,000 billion that were invested in various coins. So we opened a crowdfunding platform for the EnergyWeb token holders in order to allow them to stake those tokens and provide the means to NG Energy Access to do its business with a promise to reimburse in tokens with, of course, some interest. So it's a proof of concept. We we opened the platform to raise $100,000 to test the concept and the willingness of the energy web token holders to stake them in this manner. And we thought we might need 2 weeks of funding campaign. We actually needed only 7 hours. And we attracted about a little bit less than 160 different holders, because we put a cap on what the holder could provide in order to really test the concept. So quite successful. It's not equity, it's debt, really. And the nice thing I believe in this project is that, in fact, we wanted to provide the means to link the value of a token to a real industrial activity, in the sense that the return on the staking for the moment is fixed, but in the near future will be linked to the activity of NG in Africa. So if it works well, it will be more percentage than if it works less well, you see. So again, this is linking the attractiveness to the Energy Web token to the activity of an affiliate of the Energy Web Foundation. And I found that this was probably better than a purely speculative value, as we are seeing in the field for many years, and with consequences that we all suffer from now. And therefore, I'm quite glad to see that the campaign went so well. There are next steps to be envisaged, because for the moment it's purely funding. We convert Energy Web tokens into ultimately dollars. We do our business and we convert them back. What's next is, in fact, to provide the equipment that we install on the field with their own wallet, right? And so the holder of tokens would essentially pre-fund the manufacture and installation of those equipment, and the user would basically pay the wallet of the equipment itself, which would cut another slice of various processes and in fact help manage risk, because essentially the equipment would not be manufactured until they are fully funded by the Energy Web token community. In that way, Rafael was talking about cutting the middlemen. We are cutting quite a lot of intermediaries and providing a more direct link between cryptocurrencies and real world activity.
Thanks, Etienne, for your insights on this one. So with 6 more minutes left on the clock for this session, could you please briefly share with us your point of views from the organization, of course, you are representing, on the most important use cases, challenges, but also opportunities that you see from the application of blockchain technology in energy? So let's start with you, Kai.
Yeah. So I think one of the most interesting use cases, and I really love the one from Etienne. I think that's really amazing. But on our side, what we're working on is a tool that allows you, and now it's a different topic, it's EV charging. And what we were looking at is how can we allow EV chargers, so people that are charging their electric vehicle, to select their their supplier, so their electricity supplier at the public charging station. So for now, this is a supplier switching process. It's not possible because the charging point operator is basically deciding who the supplier is. And what we would like to achieve is that you can make a switch. So you go to public charging station, you identify with your SSI wallet, and then you have a supplier credential that proves that you have a supply contract. And with that, you can start a charging session and you get your invoice of the charging session with your electricity invoice to your home. That could also allow you that you use the production of your own PV panel. If you have an overproduction at home, you feed into the grid, you could use that electricity and in real time charge your car at another location in the grid. So these are processes that require a lot of information today. They are possible, but they take a couple of weeks until they are implemented. So it's not possible to use them on such a short-term thing like EV charging. So what we were building is we were creating decentralized identifier for all involved parties in that system. We developed an app that is kind of a user wallet, but that also uses the open charging network. And we made an end-to-end verifiable process that at the end, all participants, so the TSO that is managing the supplier switching, as well as the CPO is getting, and the supplier is getting in a verifiable presentation of everything that happens, end-to-end secured and fully auditable. So we know basically who was at the charging station, which supplier has been selected because there is a verifiable credential, and that is then merged with a time series of the charging session and presented in one document, completely end-to-end signed. So you can again skip intermediaries, and it's a working project. So I will not go into more details. If you have questions, you can also ask me afterwards on it. But I think that this shows again that SSI verifiable credentials help a lot to do this sector or cross-sector coupling, and these use cases will pop up more and more. And that's why I'm really excited about. I see a lot of challenges when it comes to IoT devices. Oh, not IoT devices. If you interact with the physical world where we don't have smart meters and IoT devices, then it becomes very difficult. But for me, SSI verifiable credentials, it's what we are excited about and where we will continue to work on.
Thanks, Kai. And Raphael, your 1 minute response, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think I said it before in terms of the use cases we've been focused on. I think, despite the size of guarantees of origin in terms of a market potentially for the future, we've been focusing on a lot of self-sovereign identity kind of side of blockchain where, you have a trusted register of either assets, IoT devices, information sets that you need to trade with different partners or different companies in the whole energy value chain, regulators, DSOs, and such, and making that a trusted and decentralized, information exchange will mean that any new party coming in or any changes to infrastructure are far more painless in terms of everything, all the paperwork and things that, for example, Kai was talking about, a couple of weeks of getting all the information in the right place for everyone to agree that that transaction was correct. And for me, I think IoT blockchain has huge potential in terms of not just registering different assets on a substation or a power plant or things like that, but actually the information that they're generating, sharing that with obviously all the caveats around what is very sensitive in terms of all the things that Paul very, very correctly mentioned in terms of you have critical infrastructure that generating all the generation or lack of generation of energy could affect entire nation. So there's other use cases as well, but I don't think we have time to go into them. But I would just
Thanks, Raphael. Paul, your concluding remark.
Yeah, so my concluding remark is that most renewable deployments across the smart grid and electrification of vehicle infrastructure today are considered IoT assets. So data traceability, authenticity, security, these are all critical enablers for setting energy tariffs, trading carbon credits, and fulfilling demand where it's needed. And so Keegan's Open IoT Safe app that we've already deployed on Core Wireless's OmniSIM with Energy Web's decentralized crypto is already bringing or already capable of bringing transactional data security at the source in transit and authentication that forms the basis of the world's first open source data exchange for energy grid players. So obviously that's already something that we've tried together. We've built this ecosystem, and obviously we're extremely excited because we believe that this is going to drive adoption across a wide range of energy players, from smart meters, EV chargers, and solar generators. It's built upon an open standard, which always helps to have a very open ecosystem to do that. We also note that Vodafone have launched a digital asset broker initiative at Mobile World Congress 2022, in which they announced with EnergyWeb and MasterCard a collaboration to build up an open platform for developers to build services for machines to transact and to build up what they call the economy of things play with each other. And of course, the first use case is indeed on the energy grids with electric vehicle charging, whereby you transact on the grid and then settlement is done with MasterCard afterwards. And we'll definitely be following that initiative with great interest because we believe it's a great use case. So thank you. That concludes my closing remarks.
Thank you. We have already David Palmer connected, so he will be talking about this in the next panel. One final word from you, Etienne, so we wrap up the panel. Thank you.
Yes, very quickly, in fact, because many things have been said that I agree with. My belief is that the distributed identifier will be key to the next step of many use of blockchain, not necessarily only to implement new business cases, decentralization of energy production, but also in existing processes. For instance, Raphael's mentioned about sovereign identity for people can of course apply to existing assets, and windmills, for instance, are a nice case where you have a lot of different parties that must agree on what happened. Why didn't the work as expected? Was it because of no wind, or because it was constrained, or because it broke, and why, and so on and so on. And therefore, having a single trove of information, a truth, which can be verified by independent body, is crucial to simplify a lot of processes. And that's just an example. There's so many examples of existing activity that could be simplified by use of good use of blockchain and identifiers.
Thank you, Etienne, and thank you, Paul, Raphael, and Kai for your participation. I really appreciate it. There are some questions on the Q&A session, so if you could have some time, you can go through them and answer them. So without further ado, I would like to proceed to the next panel of the day that is focusing upon applications and learnings from the industry. The next panel will be moderated and hosted by Arno Laven. Arno is active in the blockchain enterprise since 2015. He's a founder and lead of blockchain team across different organizations, enterprises like the Royal Dutch Philips, Royal Dutch Shell, advisor to Bosch, KLM, executive role at EnergyWeb Foundation. He is also the co-founder of WB Node. So Arno, welcome. Thanks for joining, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Johannes, and thank you for the invitation to host this session. It's an honor, especially with the distinguished panelists that we have. And I have to mention that we are still missing one panelist, so I think that the organization is now working frantically behind the scenes to contact Harry Behrens of Blocksmove and see whether he can join us in time, because it would be great to have him on this panel as well. So welcome everyone to this panel, which is about the applications, and there we have Harry. Welcome, Harry, to this panel on the applications of blockchain technology in the energy sector. So my name is Arno Laven. I am, as Johannes mentioned, co-founder of WB Node, which is a strategy and technology consulting firm in decentralized technology. And we have worked for clients like Shell, EnergyWeb Foundation, UNDP, SAP, Bosch. So not only in energy, but also on other topics. And what is interesting as consultants, we observe a shift with organizations from working on proofs of concept and asking the more general question, what does blockchain mean for our company or industry, to really more specific questions on, for instance, tokenization of assets, or other real cases that are looking for application of blockchain rather than, let's say, the more generic understanding of blockchain. And that to me is a very positive sign. So this shift from theory and exploration to real world applications. And as mentioned, that is the topic of this panel. And I am honored to be hosting this with this group of distinguished panelists. We have David Palmer, which you already saw. He wanted to react because he was mentioned by one of the previous panelists. He's blockchain lead at the Vodafone Business IoT. Then we have Harry Behrens. He is CTO of Blocksmove. Harry, welcome. We have Mark Fabian Körner, who is postdoctoral researcher at the Fraunhofer Institute, the University of Bayreuth, and the Research Center for Finance and Information Management, where he serves as a group head. And last but not least, we have Emanuele Rossi, who is the product manager at FlexiDAO. So my first question is actually to all of you, and I would like you to answer in a sequence. I will point to you when it's your turn, and it's actually a threefold question. So could you introduce yourself by answering these three questions? First of all, I'm really interested to hear how you got into blockchain. Secondly, why you think that blockchain plays an important role in energy. And thirdly, what applications are you working on or have you been working on and are you most proud of? So let's start with David. You are on mute, David.
Apologies. So first of all, really excited to be a part of this panel today. I believe blockchain and energy is a very good mix. I think blockchain and distributed ledger technology can help the energy sector to optimize, and I think we're starting to see that already with the Energy Web Foundation. In terms of how I got into blockchain, about 2012, mining Bitcoin, not really understanding it. Then obviously Ethereum smart contracts, 2014-15. And then from that point, it was more about how I could use the potential or explore the potential of the technology for the industry I was in, which is telecoms. So we started to explore, how blockchain and distributed ledger technology could, potential use cases for telecom. And then that goes to the last part, which is application. We discovered that we thought blockchain would be good at joining an ecosystem for IoT devices, providing those IoT devices with interoperability, providing them with trust, providing them with the ability through smart contracts for automatic transactions, and then we started looking at that as an application. And that's where the digital asset broker was born. And for energy, one of the use cases we're looking at for those device-to-device IDs, interoperable IDs, the transactions, automated transactions, is in EV charging, so electronic vehicle charging. And this is where the car is actually paying. So there's a lot of emphasis on the Tesla experience, which is closed loop, which is about a person paying, but we're actually focusing on fleets and the actual EV paying the charger direct in an automated way. So that's the digital asset broker application, which was actually launched by our CEO officially in February at the Mobile World Congress. So hope I've done a good job of that and I've covered all the points. If I haven't, let me know.
There will be many more follow-up questions, David. So no worries. Thank you for this brief introduction. So let's switch to Harry, please. Harry, could you also answer the three questions? How did you get into blockchain? Why do you think it plays an important role in energy? And what applications are you most proud of?
Yes, so I pretty much got in the same timeline in parallel to David. Hi, David. So first, I was totally impressed by the sheer disruptive potential of Bitcoin. Not really seeing any use cases beyond the obvious one, it being digital gold or a store of value, but it being totally revolutionary. And what you see here, I'm a technician. having solved the double spending problem or the Byzantine generals problem, which is a problem which is thought of as unsolvable in decentralized processing, is worth more than 5 Nobel Prizes in my personal point of view. Plus, I love the disruptive potential. I mean, look at the Genesis block of Bitcoin. This was not just technology, this came with a message, but still not really usable. It was not really programmable. Yes, it has a script language, but the script language of Bitcoin is quite poor. The best you could do is colored coins. But then Vitalik Buterin came along and opened up the world computer, and that's when it clicked. So this is going to just take with it whole industries, just like the web and the web 2 took with it and created a new whole industries, and I was hooked. Then my background's totally in software, always small companies. But then in 2015, for the first time, I joined Daimler, a big company, Daimler or Mercedes-Benz Financing, which is an asset financing company around for automotive called captive financing. And they are seeing a scenario where we're going away from my car-based mobility towards much more fragmented mobility, urban mobility as a service, many service providers, many cities with many service providers, very much pay-per-use, so you don't keep the asset that you're using. So you're seeing very much fragmentation along many dimensions. And semantically, fragmentation and decentralization are, if not twins, they're definitely closely related. So it became obvious that applying decentralized technologies to fragmented market makes imminent sense. Managed to convince the board of management of Daimler Mobility, now called Mercedes-Benz Mobility, of that, and got myself the mandate to found and lead the Daimler Mobility blockchain factory. And then we applied it, and now come YBC. We applied it to urban mobility at first, because that is a fragmenting market. And through that, we actually got to work with 50 Hertz, one of the big energy operators, backbone energy operators, transmission service operator in Germany, and the Energy Web Foundation. Why? Because the energy market is also decentralizing by the sheer fact of renewable energies, where you have localized small energy power plants, a wind wheel or a solar panel, which you cannot stack. So they're spread out. By the other fact that charging stations are factor hundreds to 1 with regards to how many you need to achieve coverage to fuel your cars. And in general, also the capability to store and forward power, which also needs decentralization. So we kind of figured out between us, that's the Energy Web Foundation, that's 50 Hertz under the Elia Group, and us at Daimler Mobility, that what you need here are decentralized protocols to count what is happening and to prove what's happening. So and we arrived at a hybrid framework which combines verified credentials, which prove real world facts. They attest to signatures, they attest to contracts, they attest to device data, where an identified party signs data or signs a contract. You use that for the real world, physical reality, and then you use blockchain to anchor it and provide the actual accounting for the chain of proof, as you were. So the application that we're seeing now is precisely decentralized applications where, and this is the name of the company that I'm representing, where power meets mobility. And here I would like to basically quote my favorite manifest, credit to Elia Group. So it can be found on the web, and the target and what's the application is making the EU the world's first climate neutral economy will require more than just an energy transition. To cut CO2 emissions by 2050, many sectors will need to make far-reaching changes. 2 sectors that play a key role in society have the leverage needed to do this: power and mobility. So that's where the name of the company comes from, and that's where we position ourselves. And what the application that I'm proudest of right now is, we have a project ongoing with the Energy Web Foundation and 50 Hertz, where we combine electric mobility with a decentralized charging products to essentially provide end-to-end green charging, green power with the full end-to-end underlying accounting, proving verified credentials for it. And this is something that, barring regulation or barriers, is ready to go live. So this is probably what I am the proudest of.
Thank you very much, Harry, for this introduction. It's always great to hear what you are doing, what the background was. I had an immediate follow-up question, but I will I will restrain myself and ask it after the introduction of Mark Fabian. And Mark Fabian, I think it's interesting because Harry was talking about the net zero, or actually zero emissions in 2050. And I know that you have been doing a lot of work on decarbonization. So please, also for you, the three questions. How did you get into blockchain? Why does it play an important role in energy? And what is it that you're working on that you are most proud of?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me today. To be honest, I first became aware of blockchain when I started my way as a researcher in information systems back in 2016. And when we founded here at our institute, the Fraunhofer Blockchain Lab, and dealt there with first possible applications, so to say, in the industry. And then 2 or 3 years ago, we started projects that used blockchain solutions in the energy sector. And I guess it is now a matter of accelerating sustainable growth while at the same time keeping energy supply secure and economical. And end-to-end digitalization in the energy sector through blockchain technology processes is indeed, in our opinion, actually a very decisive component in achieving this goal, actually, in the end. The use cases or the cases, the applications we are looking at in the energy space are of course like strongly aimed towards the decarbonization, as you mentioned, Arno, in the energy industry specifically. So this means, for example, that we're trying to track CO2 emissions across different sectors, across different companies, and also across national borders, of course, and above all, to make these CO2 emissions or the CO2 data, the information verifiable, so that every company involved in a supply chain, in a supply network, whatever, can really understand and can verify how much CO2 is actually in the products that I've actually bought. And of course, the same also applies to the power, to the electricity sector, to electricity grids and so on, where we are currently working with various grid operators here in Germany on different solutions to verify the amount of CO2 in a specific amount of electricity and pass it on to the customers in a tamper-proof manner in the end. So what we're doing right now is building like GDPR compliant CO2 guarantees of origin for electricity, for hydrogen, and also for heat, for example.
Great, thank you very much. Very interesting. And again, I have many follow-up questions, but we'll get to that later on in the panel. Last but not least, Emmanuel, welcome, Emmanuel Rossi. Thank you for being on the panel. Also for you, the three questions that I asked, how did you get into blockchain? Why does it play an important role in energy? And what applications are you most proud of?
Thank you very much for having me. Probably a novice compared to the other panelists related to how I discovered blockchain and when. But around 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to attend the Smart City Expo here in Barcelona. And there was a panel given by Bettina Warburg about blockchain technology in general. And I was really impressed about the technology, even though I didn't actually understand much. It was just my first very brief interaction with that. And so later on, I decided to start digging into it and try to understand if there was something that could be used in the energy sector. And I decided to pursue a career that combined my background, which is energy, and this new technology, blockchain. And 5 years ago, there was just a handful of companies or of small startups working on blockchain, at least public or that I was aware of. There was Elo3 Energy, Power Ledger, WePower, Electron, and then there was FlexiDAO, and then basically here I am. So in these past 4 years, we have been working with blockchain, developing solutions for energy buyers and energy suppliers, and we have seen the potential of blockchain across the entire energy sector. Basically, we started with a peer-to-peer energy trading software with digital and decentralized identities, digital twins of assets. This was the very beginning of our journey, and we thought that it was going to be disrupting, but it was too early. So we pivoted, and we are now focusing more on decarbonization and sustainability reporting and certification of energy, working with Energy Tag for the creation of granular certificates, and in particular the certification of 24/7 electricity procurement. And then we see the importance of blockchain in many other use cases, but mainly the main idea, I think, is that the electricity sector went and is going through a very big change from a very let's say simple, even though it was not really simple, but simple system, like sort of a one-way flow from very big generators, usually situated far away from consumption hubs, to consumption hubs. So the data flow was not that difficult, but with decentralized energy resources, including batteries, including electric vehicles and mobility in general, then there's a overwhelming amount of data that needs to be tracked, and a lot of traditional companies, DSOs, and other interested parties need to find a way to actually deal with this amount of data, and blockchain could actually provide a very good solution for some particular use cases. And just to conclude again, during these last 4 years at FlexiDAO, we have developed our software that's called Respring, that basically performs data collection, data consolidation, and hourly electricity matching for energy buyers and energy suppliers. The software now is present in 12 countries. It's used by companies like Google, Microsoft, and many others to prove their 24/7 carbon-free electricity results. We are basically founding members of Energy Tags, which is an association that has as an objective to create a granular certificate, sort of an add-on to the current energy attribute certificate system, that aims to create a granular and hourly certificate, so not bound to 1 megawatt hour of amount of electricity, but bound to the timestamp of the production and consumption. And right now we are tracking consumption and production from more than 30,000 assets across these 12 countries, and around well, a little bit more than 2 terawatt hours of electricity consumption per year. So that's, I think, basically.
Yeah, and quite impressive, especially these numbers and where you are active already. So thank you for that, Emmanuel. So Harry, you were saying that at a certain point you convinced the management board of Daimler to go into blockchain. What were their main concerns when you were presenting this new technology to them?
Well, this was, as far as the mainstream is concerned, relatively early. So this was, I started doing the evangelizing pitching in 2017. So the main concerns is, what is blockchain? Isn't that Bitcoin? So it was at that level. And it took quite a while to do the necessary basic, cluing up of people so we can have at least a discussion. So, and then the concern is more about, all right, but does this really work for us, and how do we make this fit into our existing markets? So those were the concerns. But in my case, I have to say, credit where credit is due, that there were concerns, but people were opening and listening and willing to deal with with it. And in the end, they said the basic concern from the sides of those who basically did the yay or the nay is we don't fully understand it. We see that there's possibly something. You seem to be very enthusiastic about it. We know you know your stuff, so we'll give you that much of trust. But now, okay, show us. And that was essentially the stance that the company took. They took a leap of faith in a way, flanked, of course, by the sheer recognition that beyond the hype in the crypto market and the speculation aspect, which is also part of crypto, it's definitely real, but it's a different part. Industrial blockchain, and especially if you apply certain other technologies, and again, I will come back to those, verified credentials to blockchain, then you can actually improve the scalability of technical platforms which handle transaction processing by orders of magnitude. You're not doing evolutionary improvements. You're simply going 100 times more efficient easily if you give yourselves the luxury to think things from scratch, greenfield, and build your system decentralized from the core, decentralized first. And then I had a certain amount of time and I proved it worked. We were production ready. And at that point in time, it was clear that in order to take it into production, we would need to put this into a spin-off. Various reasons, foremost being focus and speed. And the focus of a premium car maker is not the focus of a decentralized transaction platform, and the speed of a premium car OEM captive financing company is also not the speed and the flexibility that such decentralized techniques takes. And that's when we did a spin-off, but we're still working, we're still working with Daimler with one of the subsidiaries, specifically from the fleet business, where now we see fruition. So we have something very real, which is called the mobility budget app, which is essentially the kind of app your employer would give you. And with that, you go and charge, you move, you hail a taxi, you potentially have a subscription to a car or a carpool, and it's put into one app. But because it already combines the charging operators, it combines the transport operators, and they're all different. You can only do this without losing tons of money in the operational side of things if this is fully automated and most of all, no integration pain. And the biggest promise and the biggest beauty of these decentralized crypto protocols are there is essentially no integration because the protocol handles the identification, the signatures, the transactioning. So, and all you need is anybody just plugs their plug into the socket of the protocol and you're interacting. So that's the journey that was behind that.
Great, thanks for explaining that, Harry. And turning to you, David, how is that journey in Vodafone? Because I can imagine that Vodafone being a more technical company, that it becomes more natural to use technologies like blockchain and emerging technologies. But at the same time, the biggest critics of blockchain I always find in IT and in telcos and in more traditional, let's say, software companies. So how did you deal with it? And then my follow-up question to that would be, why? Because you are also working on EV related stuff. Why is that, you think? What's the interesting thing there that also Harry was alluding to?
Yeah, I think you only need me or Harry on the panel because we say exactly that. We've had exactly the same experiences, and it's very simple. I mean, what I'd say from a Vodafone point of view is that most connectivity service providers like Vodafone are on a journey to become digital service providers. You know, one of the mantras we have in Vodafone is that we're becoming a technology company, and you're seeing this not just in telco but across industries. Easier said than done, though. But what you've seen with Vodafone is you know, the hiring of you know, thousands of data scientists, building a massive sort of technology hub or technology hubs around the world. And trying to use this sort of base technology capability with 5G to form new solutions. Now, in terms of blockchain, like Harry, you know, you sort of mentioned blockchain. People say Bitcoin, Bitcoin, right? And part of it was you know, to try and promote some understanding of the technology. And I think where maybe the industry failed was that we spoke a lot about the protocol. and this protocol, this layer one's better than this one. But we didn't speak enough about the benefits. We didn't speak enough about what the technology could actually do for a telecoms operator, where the money was, because part of the feedback you get is, okay, you don't talk about the database, you talk about the application that the database is solving. So part of the journey was to really show the benefits of this. So part of it was, okay, this is where blockchain is being used, not just for cryptocurrency, but in industry. These are the benefits. These are the potential opportunities. This technology has the potential to revolutionize a lot of industries, but the business model is different, because a decentralized ecosystem-driven technology like blockchain is not about a control point. It's not about you owning data, etc. It's about trying to find a way to monetize your presence in that ecosystem. You can't own it, right? The whole point about blockchain is it only makes sense where you're dealing with other parties outside of your organization. So if for a permission blockchain, it makes sense, for example, in roaming, where you have other operators that you don't necessarily fully trust, and you need that trust layer there for settlements. For IoT, it makes a lot of sense, because essentially you're joining and opening up an ecosystem of devices that can't trust each other without the blockchain technology. And there are obviously revenue opportunities where you can make new business models on that. So that was part of the case that we had to make to get buy-in, to explore further. And credit to Vodafone, we got the support right from the top to explore and learn fast, fail fast. There were 4 MVPs that were taken, 4 blockchain POCs that were taken to MVP. One of them was the IoT. There was a supply chain, digital identity, and another business ecosystem one. And those are very much still in place. So the one that was announced in February, the digital asset broker, is the blockchain for IoT. And that comes on to a lot of your question about why energy and why automotive, and those two things come together to sort of come to describe EV charging and mobility. And for me, it's simply because those are two very strong points for Vodafone. So 7 out of 10 of the SIMs actually in the car are Vodafone SIMs. So we have a very strong proximity in automotive. We actually have an automotive division. And for energy, that's another very big area for us. We work with a lot of the big energy companies in Europe, and these and I think EV charging and fleets. We're on the cusp of one of the biggest transformations of mobility and energy that we've ever seen, with some of the announcements across the developing world, at least with strict targets to move to electronic vehicles and clean energy. And you're seeing a lot of momentum in this area. So people are listening to the likes of Harry and myself, who are coming up with solutions to support them in that transition. So it's one of the areas where blockchain plays a key role, because it does provide the trust. It also provides smart contracting. It provides cryptography. It provides a lot of the tools that the industry needs to develop these new business models and power the transformation to clean and auditable energy. So that's why we went that way. Also, as I said, because of our proximity. And yeah, we're really excited about it, because it's only the beginning of the market. So hopefully I've answered your question.
Yes, yeah, you certainly did. And when I first learned about your initiative, it was very clear to me why Vodafone would do this. Well, there's a very obvious one, being actually also an IoT company and related to IoT. But I was also thinking, is it also the experience that you have with roaming that actually makes it interesting to look at this? Because what you're basically talking about in EV charging, but maybe also in mobility in a larger sense, is roaming.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's something I can't give away too much, but that's something we're definitely bringing into the solution. But more importantly, what I forgot to say is that the right to play of a telco operator like Vodafone is that we're bringing sort of cellular to blockchain. So in our solution, we use the SIM as a root of trust. We built a bridge between the SIM and the blockchain, so you can have external signing and authentication by that SIM on the blockchain. So we're actually bringing cellular, to merging that with blockchain. And I think that's where our sort of USP or our right to play comes from in this. So we're not just doing a me too and saying, okay, we're developing a blockchain. We're actually not a layer 1. So our solution is a layer 2, and the protocol is about bringing SIMs and devices on chain, with the TPS or transactions per second and scale, leveraging the cryptography and hardware secure module in the SIM, so that devices and the blockchain can work together seamlessly to have trust and sign transactions.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. I saw that Harry raised his hand, but he lowered it again. So I don't know, maybe briefly, Harry?
Yes,
because
I just wanted to mention that you mentioned roaming, and the paradigm of roaming, not the physical roaming SIM card, is precisely what verified credentials and decentralized identifiers do, and what decentralized tech supports. You get onboarded once with your credential, and because they're decentralized, they're self-contained, you then can represent them to any other operator in that kind of ecosystem. They don't know you, but they can verify your credentials, and your credentials are being countersigned, which can again be verified by trusted parties. And therefore, one customer relationship can give you access to each and every single one of the service providers in your platform. So I have background in voice over IP. My first my first venture was a voice over IP venture, and that's where I absorbed this paradigm. And it is the benchmark. There is nothing more seamless than roaming, and with this tech, you can apply it to service roaming across CPOs, across mobility providers. So sorry for the brief interruption, but that was just too beautiful.
And if I may add to that, sorry, Levin, but if I may add to that, I mean, that is the power of this in EV charging, because if you look at some of the operators, you're having a playback of the Web 2, which is, okay, we'll build the ecosystem, we'll own the database of devices, we'll own all the data, and you trust us. And it's actually what Ari and myself are saying. I believe we're saying the same thing, is that where you have a distributed ledger, then everybody's a part of the ecosystem. And where you have decentralized IDs and verifiable credentials, that is how, those are the tools to execute that trust in that ecosystem. So a decentralized ecosystem for EV charging and in the energy sector is very powerful in that transition.
Thank you, David. We could spend, I think, another 2 hours discussing this, and I have many more follow-up questions. But I would also like to address one other thing with Mark Fabian. Sorry, with Mark. I know that's Mark Fabian, but it's Mark. You were talking about tracking CO2 emissions. So I have 2 questions there. What do you see as the most important role of blockchain there? And what is the role of the regulator in making that actually happen? And are you talking to them?
Yeah, so concerning the first question, like we do see in many projects one specific problem or challenge, and this also relates to what David and Harry already mentioned. Like it's from our point of view, it's clearly the lack of a simple, so to say, end user interface or end user connection. And we do have a project for a crowd balancing platform in energy markets, where we also like analyzing how to integrate mobility, how to integrate vehicles for crowd balancing, for example. And what we see there is the last step, like towards the vehicles, is a really a problem, because GDPR makes it not possible to store personal relatable data on the blockchain, but we need the blockchain or blockchain applications, blockchain solutions here for transparency or for verifiability in the end. And then we're like actually in doing or in finding some solutions and work around for this GDPR challenge here with self-sovereign identity concepts, decentralized IDs, zero knowledge proofs, that only the proof, the correctness, so to say, of data is on the blockchain. And this is exactly the point where the blockchain is necessary or really adds value here, but no personal, no GDPR relevant data is stored on the blockchain and is transparent, so to say. So that's concerning your first question regarding the regulator. Yes, indeed, I'd say there is a role and a very, very important role for the regulator. In our opinion, or in my opinion, and the so-called sandboxing approaches are very necessary, especially in the energy sector, to find solutions, to test solutions, as sandboxing allows, for testing concepts, testing solutions under real-world conditions that are currently only partially in line with existing legal and regulatory frameworks, and the results of these experimental spaces in the sense of sandboxing, which are of course limited in time and or location, lay the foundation for further development of the legal framework based on real evidence. And this is exactly what we need when we talk about blockchain solutions, blockchain applications in the energy sector, as the energy sector is, of course, and that's good to mention. It's good that it's really like very regulated here, but we need to find spaces, we need to find possibilities actually to test new solutions and to have some real world evidence then for these solutions, which then could also, of course, or could hopefully they have some feedback, some input for further development of regulations and so on. So yes, there is indeed a very, very important role of the regulator here.
And in that sense, I guess we're all looking forward to regulatory sandboxes being deployed more, also on a European level, which is, I believe, upcoming. So, so that will be great. Thanks, Mark, for answering that question. Emmanuel, turning to you, I think that I speak for everyone here. I think also most of the listeners who are in the blockchain space. Sometimes you get the feeling that things are going very, very slowly, and especially in the energy sector. And I saw that one of the questions actually in the Q&A was, hey, look, we're, what is it, 12 years after the launch of Bitcoin, we're so many years after the launch of Ethereum, we're so many years after the first peer-to-peer energy trading initiatives. What is the where is the breakthrough, and why is it not happening? Do you have an idea on that, Emmanuel?
I think that most of all, there is this sort of feeling with crypto that everything needs to boom very quick. We have a lot of projects especially in other sectors, that they just incredibly boom in the first months, completely in an inexplicable way. So there's no actual proof behind some of those booms, mainly because it's just pure speculations, or because they're very, very hyped. The energy sector, I don't think it's a very hyped sector. So usually people tend to focus on something else. Now we have DeFi, we have NFTs that are definitely more interesting for a general audience. But within the sector, I don't think that we have moved so slow. So in the end, everything related to energy and thinking that it could be completely deregulated is absurd. We will still need regulators, and regulators will drive the way for future use cases that will benefit a lot by using blockchain. And this is something also that happens not only in the energy sector, but in some other sectors, that people are basically riding the hype of blockchain to force the technology into use cases that do not require the use of the technology, which makes for very weak cases of blockchain applications and create an ecosystem that is not very strong. So we have seen a lot of development. We have seen regulators now starting to open up with use cases that will be crucial for blockchain. I'm thinking, for example, about the new regulated acts of the European Commission that will be forcing in years to come 24/7 matching and in 15 minutes granularity for proving green hydrogen production. So we are seeing this is the first worldwide example of a regulation that is forcing hourly, even more than hourly matching proof in order to say that you are renewable, which is massive because right now we're using annual values. But since many of these use cases that are empowered by blockchain needs to be created and opened up by regulators, there's like the process is slow because it has to be that way, because the electricity system needs to be balanced. We need to switch on the lights whenever we want, and we cannot just disrupt everything just to try. So I'm very positive about the technology. I'm seeing more and more news about adoption, more and more use cases coming up. Energy communities is going to be one other use case that is going to be massive in the future. Electric vehicles right now are getting adoption for themselves, for electric vehicles, and then blockchain will disrupt the field as well. But I don't think it's good to go too fast sometimes. And blockchain and energy are definitely a good couple, but they need to progress and do their things the way it is, which is a bit slower than decentralized finance or other sectors.
Yeah, so go fast and break things is not particularly a good slogan for the energy sector. I would agree. So as a final question, because we're almost at the end of this panel, and I would like to have a short answer from you guys. The next panelists are already there, and then maybe Emmanuel, sticking with you, you already gave a little bit of an answer, but if you have to choose one thing, what are you most excited about? What is on the horizon for blockchain and energy, or blockchain in general?
Well, I now talking about my specific context right now at Flexida, what we are focusing mainly is this part of 24/7 hourly or even more than hourly electricity matching. We think that this is where the electricity matching and procurement should go. A lot of investments in the past have been made just to cover annual values, annual consumptions, and that is not feasible. It's not a really good investment going forward. We need to go deep to the hour and even more in order to have a system that is perfectly balanced, or as balanced as it can be, that can also incorporate many other technologies like battery storage, like electric vehicles, and something that goes in line with that is everything that relates to sustainability reporting, that right now is basically entirely based on certification. We have energy attribute certificates that are our annual values and fixed to 1 megawatt hour of volume, which was a fantastic idea, fantastic way to start things up 20 to 30 years ago. Right now, we need to go one step beyond. We need to have hourly certificates. We need to have a certification for on-site generation. We need to have it for battery storage, for electric vehicles, in order to let everyone participate in the electricity market and benefit from that. So this is where I'm seeing the most. Hydrogen is another part that I think is going to be very interesting, but there are many others. So
great, thank you very much, Emmanuel. How is that for you, Mark? What are you most excited about? What's on the horizon?
I guess from our view, like as practice-oriented researchers, so to say, it is the question on how to combine or integrate blockchain solutions with other technologies such as SSI, decentralized ID, zero knowledge proofs, and so on, so that we could find solutions and ways for being in line with GDPR requirements, while also ensuring some kind of transparency. And when we are able to do this, and this is why I'm really curious about this, then our goal is like really to create a end-to-end connection from energy supply to energy sinks or energy consumers, to exchange, for example, CO2 data in a really verifiable manner, to reach like the climate goals we have, to like have incentives for end consumers to really behave like in a CO2 adaptive manner.
Great, thank you very much, Mark. I'm looking forward to that as well. David, what are you most excited about that's on the horizon? And I saw one question in the Q&A, and by the way, panelists, you can see the Q&A and maybe you can answer there as well, because we don't have time to go through all the questions, but it was the question whether there's any fresh news regarding your project, which had a trial launch in Newbury, UK. So maybe you can take that along in what you're most excited about. You are on mute.
Very excited about digital asset broker. Very excited about the power of decentralized blockchain technologies, digital identities, verifiable credentials, trust, to bring about new efficiencies and business models in energy. What we're starting to see is some of that in flex grid optimization and things like EV charging. I think that's only the beginning. I think once devices have identities, once devices have the ability to communicate trustfully with and securely with each other and transact automatically using smart contracts, the world, and the sky is the limit. In terms of any news on our announcement, so Newbury trial was announced in February. We will shortly, in the coming months, be announcing an extension of that, which basically covers 350 rapid chargers in the UK and a number of fleets. So very much UK starting and then moving on to markets in Europe. But we have a lot of excitement about the DAB EV charging application. And of course, we're looking at extending this to other use cases, supply chain, other embedded finance in use cases in IoT as well. So a lot of news coming, but I can say that there's some big news coming on EV charging in the next month.
Great, thank you very much. Harry?
Yes, and for me today is a perfect day because I'm in Berlin today and I'm meeting two companies who each in their own way deal with two different types of renewable energy certificates. And what I am really excited about, and now comes a little bit of a shameless plug, is the fact that by converging what NFTs give you and what DID-based verified credentials give you, we call it NFTicket, which is the protocol that we're building, you basically have proof, verification, and accounting, as well as access and for access management and ticketing, based on essentially verified credentials, which are very close to the way business is conducted. But because a verified credential and an NFT, and we have a protocol for that, can be converged one-to-one into one another. So you can take a verified credential, mint an NFT out of it. You can then take the NFT and create a verified credential out of it. And for that now you add the power of the easy transferability and the humongous secondary market. Just think about OpenSea. So all of a sudden you can trade renewable energy certificates on OpenSea or any other comparable marketplace, even though you're actually issuing them as certificates, as verified credentials. So this convergence, purely from the technical perspective and from what it opens and from what it brings into the trading of renewable energy certificates, but also into ticketing in the widest sense for mobility. That is what is going to keep me sleepless in a good way for the next 6 months.
Well, good luck with that. And it sounds really exciting, Harry. So with that, we come to an end of this panel. And I would like to thank the panelists, David Palmer, Harry Behrens, Mark Kerner, and Emmanuel Rossi. And back to you, Johannes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arno. Thank you, Mark, Emmanuel, David, Harry. I really enjoyed the discussion. And let's jump into the final panel session for the day, which is about the status of R&D activities and innovation in Europe. And I would like to introduce to all of you Olivier Jeunesse, which is a director at Trialogue in France, and also he is a chair of the data management working group of the Bridge Initiative of the European Commission. So
we leave the panel, right? We leave now?
Yep. Olivier, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Anis. Thank you. So we have the last panel session in which we will look at what is done in Europe for research and innovation. And for that, I will have 4 panelists with me who are now connected, and I will introduce. So we will look at the status of research and innovation projects that are either studying and demonstrating the application of the blockchain in the energy sector. And so we'll have people from academia and industry. So first we'll have Alvaro Nofuentes. So you are working at ETRA I+D, and you're project manager of the Trinity project, and you've been involved in EU research and innovation for many years, in particular in the WISE Grid project, and also you were chair of the Bridge Customer Engagement Working Group. There is also Massimo Bertoncini. So you are R&D Program Director for Digital Energy at Engineering, Italian company. And you led many European research and innovation projects since FP5. And you are currently coordinating Horizon 2020 BD for Energy project, and also the Horizon Europe project Enershare on data spaces. We'll have also Yordanis Papoutsoglou. You are research associate at the Greek Research Institute, CRTH. You are part of the blockchain team, and you are also active in European Blockchain Observatory. And last but not least, we'll have Oscar Laguet Serrano. You are head of cybersecurity and blockchain at Technalia. You are a professor and leader of the first industrial blockchain laboratory in Europe, and you are involved in several EU expert groups related to cybersecurity and blockchain. So we will structure this discussion probably about something like 45 minutes, maybe a little bit less, Ioannis, because I think you want to close at 2. We'll start with the first discussion because I would like to discuss about what are the typical blockchain use cases that you have in those projects. So we can start with you, Alvaro. I know that in your Trinity project, you are developing a use case in which you are looking at guarantee of origin. So maybe you can explain what you are developing there and how you are demonstrating it in Trinity project.
Yes, of course. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me in this forum. And well, answering your question, in Trinity we are creating a framework in order to issue guarantees of origin in a more fast and reliable manner, and we are using blockchain as a backbone of this framework. So just explaining in a couple of minutes in which consists our proposal is that we have an issuing body platform that serves as an interface for the issuing body to check the current status of issuing requests and cancellation requests of guarantees of origin. Also, we have a platform that the rest producers or the different market participants in this framework can automatically request new guarantees of origins to the issuing body according to the production that they are generating. So the issuing body is able to validate this, and also it can be done automatically if it is the case, but now in this example we are assuming that we still have an issuing body. And then with this new guarantees of origins issued, the market participant can go to a market platform that it is also being developed under the scope of Trinity. And then in this market, all the transactions are done. Here the blockchain and the guarantees of origin has not they don't have a role, but the issuing body platform and the market are communicating continuously in order to, well, the market platform communicates to the issuing body platform which are the transactions that are being done in order to facilitate the issuing body to update the wallet of guarantees of origins of the different market participants, and also the issuing body can check if the different transactions are being possible. For example, if a market participant says that he wants to sell 20 guarantees of origins, but in the wallet, the issuing body checks that he only has 10, he will avoid this transaction. And also in the way around, the different market participants will be able to ask for cancellation requests to this issuing body. And this is more or less in a couple of minutes the framework that we want to test. And how the blockchain is, let's say, the backbone of all this framework. We have developed these platforms, and now we are entering in the demonstration phase. So hope that everything works as we expect.
Okay, thank you. And how many pilots are deployed for this demonstration?
Yeah, Trinity, it's all about cross-border. So our intention is to test different cross-border markets, intraday capacity, and also guarantees of origin. So we can say that Serbia is the core, is in the middle of all the environment, but we can trade with Montenegro, Croatia, and so on.
Okay, thank you. So for sure, this first use case is really one of the well-known use case where blockchain can support guarantee of origin issuing and checking. And then Oscar, you could explain the use case that you have around like peer-to-peer energy exchange and marketplace that you have in one of your projects.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for inviting me for this panel. Yeah, perhaps we have two main use cases in which peer-to-peer markets are developing in Europe in general, and we are taking part in this area. First of all, is about self-consumption communities that are in some member states like Spain, in our case, the only implementation of energy communities that are regulated, okay, in some member states. These communities are composed by prosumers who own installation for either renewable energy generation or consumption, okay, and the energy produced by members is assigned to each consumer member based on the sharing ratio that is shared by the members. We have for these regulations in some member states some constraints like the sharing ratio is predefined for the whole year. Okay, you can't change this sharing ratio. Okay. You have to have a distance between all pairs of power control centers that lower than 500 meters by regulation is down to the transformation center. Okay, a prosumer can own several installations in the same community, and for each one he has to contract with a retailer for the service and for having this smart contract, smart meter, sorry, and the DSO, the distribution system, is make the settlement based on the knowledge of the sharing ratios and, of course, providing the resource to the retailer of each consumers. Okay, we have made this blockchain platform, and we are piloting in some cases that calculates the hourly energy produced by the generators and assign it to each consumers. We have developed with a manufacturer a blockchain-ready smart meter that has the custody of the predicate key using hardware custody, and signs the transaction, the blockchain transactions that are sent and propagated by the blockchain network. Okay, and here we have opportunities to use hyperledger implementations or even Ethereum or other options. Okay. Even we have a planning tool that optimizes the ratios based on the estimation of the generation of energy, and an energy management system that maximize the consumption of assigned generator energy, and scheduling the behind the meter storage or controllable loads. Okay. Everything coordinated by a smart contract. And the other option, the second option, are the more traditional peer-to-peer energy trading, in which members can exchange energy following a peer-to-peer schemes. Less constraints in these cases. We have a typical scenario based on the regulation schemes promoted by the European Commission for the next years. And we have in the energy transactions limited by one PTU and one programmable time unit, typically an hour in some cases. And the prosumer in these regulation schemes cannot both buy and sell energy for the same PTU, but they can sell or buy energy to several other prosumers. So we create a blockchain platform that performs the settlement, validating the fulfillment of the agreed energy transactions using a smart meter measurements signed in the smart meter by all the community members. Okay. And a cost benefits analysis tools. And so we have some challenges to make automated bid creation tool for the optimal buy price based on the generation and consumption forecast, for example, and a tool to support the consumer in the process of engaging the community, the blockchain, and setting up the units, their systems, and connect to the blockchain. That is something that for the regular consumer is not quite easy.
Okay. Okay, thank you so for this detailed explanation. And then Jordanis, so on your side, you have this Renaissance and Parity project. So can you complement with one additional use case from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, CERF has different projects. And for instance, Renaissance is based on working on a private permission blockchain with using Hyperledger. There, the main component for blockchain is to create an auction platform to have to drive local energy communities. Essentially, the smart contracts there are involved for the auction, and a mechanism also on top of that will allow for local communities to have some kind of governance. They would select either to be centralized or decentralized by choosing how they are going to have to execute some code. And the second project is Parity. There, the idea is a bit similar, but the execution differs. The execution is based on the Cosmos SDK and the Tendermint, since we believe it can be robust. There are projects built on that and are available. It can be flexible and interoperable, since it is built on top of Cosmos blockchain, and it is a side chain of that universe, and it can be scalable. The project follows a layer solution in the architecture. As we said, in the layer 0 is basically the Cosmos. the side chain is used on top of that. And on another part, there is the deployed nodes on mainly on the IoT gateways that will process the smart contracts and the transactions. And then there is an oracle on top of that, so there can be exchange of information with the outside world. You will need the information from Ethernet or existing systems, legacy systems that might be really helpful for your system. Also, another thing that needs to point it out is about the data anonymization, basically, where pseudo-anonymization is used with the SHA 256 model for the users to be anonymous in the network and cannot be identified. So that's the main gist of the project. Both the difference is about the tools that are used to build, but the idea is the same, since parity aims to address destruction inertia of distributed grinds.
Okay, thank you, Jordanis. And then Massimo, so the two projects mentioned, BD for Energy is a big data for energy project, and Inertia is a energy data space project. So what is the role that the blockchain plays in this project, and what kind of use case are based on blockchain in these two projects?
First of all, thanks, Olivier, but above all, thanks to the organizers, in particular to Ioannis Vlachos for arranging this very interesting meeting. So I'm really honored to be here as speaker of this final panel. Just to let you know that Engineering Informatica, as a large ICT company headquartered in Roma, historically has been and is currently very active on deploying blockchain-based application along the overarching energy value chain in many R&D projects, at least 12 or 13 R&D projects covering a number of use cases in the last 5 years. But at the same time, we experienced some deployment, some sandbox with the Italian regulatory agencies, and Italy will provide some use case-based blockchain application delivered, deployed to some Italian energy, some Italian utilities. Having said that, the introduction by Olivier give me the opportunity just to cover this energy data space. As most of you know, there has been last year one call covering or addressing this energy data space implementation. And in that respect, blockchain, also in the former BD for Energy project, one the coordinator as well, is playing a relevant role at two different levels. First level is just utilizing blockchain and smart contract in order just to have tamper-proof multi-party energy data sharing at any levels. Second level of application of the blockchain is on the marketplace. If you look at these two different levels, for us are not considered like completely different application, but we progressing along this R&D trajectory in the last 5 or 6 years, we deployed a blockchain-based application, which is able just to allow it to integrate the two different use case or application level while utilizing the same platform. So this is something that creates a lot of economies of scale and open up to new, more consolidated levels of technological maturity. And having said that, the new effort, the new challenge is just to follow up with this, so to moving forward towards this energy data space innovative paradigms, where the European Commission invested a lot of money just to create this totally decentralized environment, hopefully, in which you are going just to feed 3 different stacks, so the interoperability, the trusted control, what they call, according just to the typical jargon related to data space, monetization, to some broader extent, compensation layer. In that respect, both BD4Energy and NSShare, for BD4Energy, we already deployed this use case, but we are going to follow up in this new NSShare energy data space related project, is just to deploy or to position ourselves at 2 different, top levels of the energy data space layer. So the intermediate one, meaning just the trusted control, and in that respect, we provided a different way to deploy just sovereignty of the data and the user access control. So pinpointing, thanks to the blockchain, that you can utilize the smart contracts in order just to embed in an automated way even preference and rights of access, in order just to allow any kind of data provider and as a follow-up or data users to have a look which typology of rights they are having on that specific data, utilizing the rationale of data space, which is keeping the data of the generation point to provide even this primitives of communication protocol in order just to stimulate data sharing, but not data, moving, going back. In that respect, within the same technological platform, we are going just to deploy a very original marketplace based on blockchain, in which we are going well beyond the purely peer-to-peer or energy commodity data sharing, but we are considering the capability for tokenized heterogeneous asset sharing in order to create a really participatory enabler as for blockchain, in order to simulate participation of the people just to the energy markets. In that sense, you can, for instance, you will be facilitated just to exchange not only energy, but you could be facilitating, for instance, the sharing of your energy consumption data. Normally, people is quite reluctant to share data. In exchange, you can get even 1 year maintenance of your smart device in your home. So you can see how this marketplace is going just to achieve a barter-like economy, in which, of course, the energy assets are central, but they could be, widening the scope and to create even new services, keeping the energy as having the pivotal role, but opening up even to, if you look at the community level, which is one of the typical use cases which we are having, you can even see new social services, like, the old lady could be not interested to give the permission for, installing in a condominium the EV charger. If she gives the permission, she could be having some discount on the energy, or maybe 1 year again maintenance for some heater in his home. So you can see how this compensation layer within the marketplace could be working. Technological wise, it's Ethereum based blockchain with private, private blockchain and typically POA, but we can discuss later on with respect to the interoperability and challenges. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Massimo. So thank you also. We have a good overview of what kind of use cases are developed in your project. And then for the second part, I would like to discuss about the challenges that are faced by blockchain application in the energy sector, in particular because in the research and innovation project, we are trying to develop novel use cases. And of course, we are facing challenges that we need to tackle and we need to fix. So maybe the first one, which is quite important when we are talking about blockchain, and in particular because we know the impact of some of the cryptocurrencies that are running is the energy consumption. And we know that proof of work is quite energy consuming. And if you look at the digitalization of energy action plan that is being set by European Commission, there will be a specific item on the need to reduce the carbon footprint of ICT. And while we are talking of digitalization of the energy system, this is quite important. So what are the options and how can we look at this challenge? Maybe Alvaro, what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, of course, since we are in R&D projects that try to reduce the carbon footprint of the European energy mix, I mean, I think that it is mandatory or almost mandatory not to use the proof of work concept, but of course that we still have possibilities to use blockchain for energy efficiency purposes. As you know, there are another forms of consensus like a proof of stake or proof of authority. And for example, I want to highlight the case that I better note, which is the case of the Trinity blockchain. Our blockchain does not rely on the miner infrastructure. We use as a consensus protocol the federated Byzantine agreement, and this allows us to, well, to have 1,000 of transactions per second. The consensus happen every 3 to 5 seconds, and also, I mean, it is quite cheap make the different transactions. For example, we have made the calculations. If we issue all the warranties of origins issued in Serbia in 2020, the overall cost would be 3.5 euros, so it is almost negligible. And well, one of the comments that may arise is that, okay, but you are research and development project, your pilot size or your demonstrators could be so small in order to be aware about the energy consumption of your blockchain. This could be a comment, but I want to highlight here that the aim of the European Commission and the aim of every European project should be to be scalable and replicable. So the final aim, the final purpose is to be used in the whole Europe, and for that reason, we should take care of this of all these parameters.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe the second challenge for you, Oscar, is related to privacy. By nature, like when you look at the blockchain, I mean, in the blocks, the idea is that we have some content that is shared by everybody, so everybody can check. So it raises some privacy issue. So how can we look at this, and is finally blockchain a challenge or an opportunity for privacy, or both probably?
Both probably. Thank you, Oliver. Yeah, first of all, we have to mention that not all information has to be on chain. We can have sensitive information off chain, of course. Even we can use blockchain. We have used in a health sector, for example, like an decentralized identity and access management for the community in order to access to private storages that has information about the health sector, about a person. In these cases, could be about a smart meter or whatever. Okay, but yeah, the first of all is not everything has to be on chain. Perhaps from a hyperlayer that I represent in some forums, we say that okay, we don't have to have everything on chain, and usually in the enterprise Ethereum alliance, we are developing some other alternatives to have the process of the private data externally to the chain regarding to Ethereum in this case. But okay, not everything on chain, but if you have to have the sensitive data on chain, we have several options. And one of the most interesting is to encrypt information at the application level. Okay, so and then you have two options. Okay, you can have okay, I don't have to the request that my information or this sensitive information has to be processed by the smart contract. Okay, we have information that you register, but the smart contract doesn't have to make any kind of decisions or automatizations about this information. Okay, in those cases, you can use a secret key, for example, a secret symmetric key shared by the peers that has to consume the information registered in this public blockchain, for example, and the DSO, the TSO, the retailer, or even the owner of this smart meter or whatever has access to the encrypted data and can decode all the information. The problem typically here is that you have to have a group of participants that has to be quite stable. We can add members that we can share with the new members the key, but we can not securely remove participants to access to the previous data. Okay, yeah, and even if the key is compromised, we compromise all the data that we have registered in this public blockchain or public permissioned blockchain. Okay, we have another alternative that is more or less one of the options that we have been working and the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, and is the okay, we can have encrypted data off chain, but access okay from the chain. Okay, we can if we remove one user or a key is compromised, we distribute new key and encrypt the data again to encrypted the data again, and we can use, and this is the point here, that you can have access to this information in the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. You can use trusted execution environments for the custody of this data, or at least to the secret to decrypt this data, and we can trust and delegate not only the custody of the key, we can delegate the processing of this data to parties, to the trusted execution environments, and the partners they only have to authenticate with these trusted execution environments in order to process for themselves the data. Okay. When the information has to be processed by the smart contract, we have another options, another cryptography. Okay, as well, the smart contract can delegate this kind of processes for the execution in third parties and in the trusted execution environments in a specific hardware designed for this or the cryptographic operations. And but the other side, the other opportunity is to use privacy-preserving computing. Technicals like homomorphic encryption can help us to process or the smart contract in this case to process the data encrypted, and we can share the public key without any kind of problem, without all the members that want to write in this case, and the smart contract can process the data and register the encrypted results without knowing the result, or we can again use a third party, especially a hardware, a trusted execution environment to decode, to decrypt the result and register in the blockchain for the in this case for the smart contract to follow the execution of the smart contract. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Oscar. So that's very clear on what can be done and how to manage it. And so one of the challenge also, Massimo, is related to interoperability and standardization. So currently, standardization of the blockchain is probably at its beginning. There is not so much standardization, and also interoperability is really a key challenge. So what is the status today? What is the impact of the current state, and what should be done now?
Thanks, Oliver, for raising this very relevant issue, I would say. If you allow me, I would like to distinguish just interoperability, and then we could be concluding with standardization. With respect to interoperability, I was really appreciating the Jordanis, speech before, talking about this, technological solution like Tendermint or Cosmos. The main reason why is that, as normal in the software engineering, everybody is going to utilize what is better to fitting its own requirements or its own expertise. And that is bringing to a proliferation, if you want, of adaptation of technological platform utilizing or adapting blockchain, so based on Hyperledger, Ethereum, or any other similar, adaptation of this, let's say, monolithic platform. So one of the major issues is that if you are going to, like I presented before in the case for BD4Energy or similar, or like Energy Data Space Project, if you would like to integrate normally blockchain application operating at different levels, that will be having a problem for how much interoperable they are, or how I can benefit from potential integration. So from one hand, there is the state of the art is for, for emerging of new framework like Tendermint or similar, or like Cosmos, in order to create modular application. And even through standardized APIs based anyway to blockchain. This is, as far as I understand, an interesting approach towards this creating interoperability. In a recently completed project, H2020 SOFI, together with other partners, we addressed this problem of interoperability between the different blockchain, exactly utilizing this approach. I have to say that this problem, to some extent, it is something which is, according to me, not much understood. So, and it is not, ready for standardization. So when we talk about standardization, it means something which, you have to be confronted with POA or POW for which algorithm, so for consensus, private versus public, or permissioned versus non-permissioned. So there are a number of open issues that I have to say they are, discussed in very different ITU or Energy Web Foundation, or even in different working groups and standardization groups. However, the major problem which I feel right now is that these initiatives are normally cross-cutting. There has been even a roundtable or an initiative led by DigiConnect from ICT putting all together, which is an impressive effort. So blockchain initiative from energy, health, or mobility, whatever you want. But this, according to me, will be creating problem if we stick on the energy sector. So on the other way around, I believe that if we really want to go for a standardization in the energy sector, we need just to carefully take on board the principal stakeholder and to inject this effort within the typical, GAM model for CIM, if you want, IC, so data modeling. In order even to take even into do consideration this, so at least if you know, because you are together with us even in Bridge, to consider in data management working group of Bridge where ICT together with energy players are there. So the effort should be dedicated, the vertical, to the energy sector. And to involve as much as possible energy stakeholder would be relevant, even considering the regulatory impact, and to try to push these people to consider the opportunity for creating sandbox. Somebody formerly was mentioning this. Sandbox allowed within certain constraints by regulatory authorities would be great in order to demonstrate not only the technical feasibility of this plethora of use case, but this is even my one other takeaway, which I would like to share with you, even the economical feasibility. Because in these hundreds of use cases, including the ones which I brought, really seldom we consider the cost benefit. So what is the extra cost for deploying this infrastructure, for adapting this blockchain, for operating this transaction, for the carbon footprint in comparison with the real benefits? So the sandbox should be even assessing this in order to see this. Okay, this makes sense to do via blockchain. And last but not least, I consider that the IDSA and Gaia-X framework could be even a very valid, a viable opportunities through OpenAI. If you wanted, through this Gaia-X, we are having an energy working group, as you certainly know, through which we could be trying to standardize at overarching level, including the two levels which I brought before, for at trusted control, access control and sovereignty, and even at the level of the compensation. So because there is a big effort from European Commission to proceed along increasing technological maturity of this data space. And I consider relevant this energy vertical working group, which according to me is working very well, in order just to to take the tree and to try to converge or to evolve towards standardization.
Okay, thank you, Massimo, for this very good remarks, in particular on how we should, cooperate together to tackle these challenges. And so one of the last challenges I would like to mention, because when we were preparing this panel, Johannes, I remember that you raised that there was a very good potential for blockchain, but one of the challenges is that we bring this new technology, but in fact, when we put it inside the home, for example, we may not have already the smart meter or the smart appliances. The appliances are not smart already. And finally, to take all the benefit from this technology, we need to have already a quite high level of digitalization of the grid and the home. So how, in the meantime, can we get some benefit from the blockchain, and what are the limits?
It should be step by step, for instance. Tackle its challenge one at a time. If you try to answer in all the challenges all together, you might find yourself creating even a bigger mess. So this is for instance, when you should consider what blockchain brings. What are the features? For instance, blockchain brings data immutability. It can bring more security. It brings on the table, for instance, the decentralization and the digitalization of processes. So this can be translated, for instance, in the smart grid by answering some of the challenges there. For instance, from a centralized smart grid where you have all the data, all the processes towards one company, you can shift it to decentralized. This can be done with the smart contracts that is executed by its node, and potentially avoid single points of failures, and also enhance your system's availability. Then you can have new models. For instance, you start having the opportunity with the identities and the ledger to start relying and building systems where even smaller entities, they can produce small amounts can be entered there. IoT devices, again, since they have an identity, they can start to be part of the network. And the new models also come towards the end of the spectrum, where you have billing systems. When you know someone, you can start billing them. When you have the data and transactions, you can start having automated billing. because when you produce or when you consume energy, for instance, or whatever you want, that's the biggest thing. It would be on the distributed ledger. It would be available to the network. And also the identities come that I may not know you by the name, but I know your address. I know what you have done. And consider also the security. In smart grids, we're talking about a big surface. We will start to have IoT devices. We will start having more people coming and producing. So you need to consider the security aspect. Digital identities are great and will lead to the authorization. So you will have devices and people doing what they should be doing. And it was great from Oscar that referred to data. Data can be outside of the blockchain and have blockchain as a settlement. Have a hash of your data of storage. And on top of that, it's about auditing. You can audit the transactions. For instance, you can audit who did what and at what time. So this creates a mechanism where you can start auditing because having a permission means that you are allowed to do something, and up to some time, you're not allowed to do different things. You're not allowed to exceed the time frame. So it's a great mechanism.
Okay, thank you, Jordanis. Unfortunately, time's running, and I'm afraid we reached already the end of the panel discussion. I see Ioannis' face appearing, so meaning that we need to close. So thank you all for this good discussion. I think we went through the typical use cases. We also listed some challenges that we need to tackle in future research and innovation. So we still have some work, but the good news is that we are already working all together in many research projects, and we'll continue in the next years to really tackle all these challenges and make blockchain for energy sector a success.
Thanks, Olivier, for your moderation, and thanks, Massimo, Jordanis, Alvaro, and Oscar for your participation. Thanks to all of the participants in today's workshop. And yeah, feel free to download the report from the European Blockchain Observatory and Forum website. And yeah, once again, thank you, everyone, and looking forward to our next workshop. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.